So the State Department is threatening to revoke visas from foreigners who say anything negative about Charlie Kirk's death. Reuters and AP reported that the State Department warned, if you praise, rationalize, or make light of Kirk being killed, you could lose your visa or be denied entry. The official line is to protect the American people. Praise, rationalize, make light of. Technically, under immigration law, they can do this because the State Department can claim certain speech creates adverse foreign policy consequences for the U.S. In this case, they're spinning it as stopping the spread of hatred and violence. But let's be honest, it's not consistent. If this were about any other figure, especially someone on the left, do you really think we'd see the same sweeping calls to yank visas? The past record of how this administration has used visa revocation shows a clear pattern, and it's not one of even-handed enforcement. That's the problem. When the rules are applied this selectively, it stops looking like protection and starts looking a whole lot more like censorship. And they say it's to protect the American people, but which American people? Because there are plenty of Americans who are not exactly mourning his death. And let me be clear, no one should ever be unalived like that. Most of us aren't celebrating violence. But at the same time, there are plenty of us who are not mourning his death either. That reality doesn't just disappear because it makes the government uncomfortable. And here is the reality. Charlie Kirk said some pretty nasty things about marginalized groups, people who are part of this country. And all of that was protected speech. And that's who we're defending. And now we want to take visas away from people who aren't heartbroken about him. It's all backwards. And for all of you out there saying, well, we don't want foreigners coming in here just spewing hate speech. Look around. The kind of hate I've seen on creator platforms since this happened, Americans threatening other Americans, saying they'll hunt them down, saying they'll unalive them. That's not foreigners. That's American citizens directing hate speech at other American citizens. And don't forget, these foreigners, they're not calling for the overthrow of our government. They're talking about a political activist. Kirk wasn't a politician. He wasn't a senator. He wasn't a president. And I guarantee you, if someone had spoken ill of someone like Minnesota Representative Melissa Hortman after violence in her case, there would have been no talk of visa bans. That wouldn't translate to the same thing. So why is Kirk suddenly untouchable? And here's the test I've talked about before. If you cut Trump out like a cardboard cutout and dropped another human being in, doing the same things he's done, none of it would ever fly. The same goes here. If you take Kirk out of this picture and plug in, a left-leaning political activist of your choice, you cannot in good faith say the reaction would be the same. There would be no sweeping calls to revoke visas just because people praised, rationalized, or made light of their deaths. It's obvious. And if you can't see that, you're lying to yourself, or worse, you just don't care to even see it. And at what point does this start to blur the line? Right now the government can get away with it by saying, well, these statements harm U.S. foreign policy. But if they're already applying the rules this inconsistently, what's to stop them from sliding further? Political speech, even the offensive kind, even celebrating someone's death is clearly protected under the First Amendment for Americans. If speech about one public figure can cost a foreigner their visa, what's to say the same logic will eventually be used to individually infringe on free speech here at home? And I know some of you will say, well, that's America, that won't happen. But the bar keeps getting lowered every single day, and the more we accept it, the less impossible it becomes. Was it wrong that Charlie Kirk was killed? Absolutely. But what's the difference between a foreigner saying they're not mourning and a U.S. citizen saying the same thing? There is none. So let me ask you, when the government says this is about protecting Americans, are they really protecting you, or are they defending the reputation of a man who worked to shrink the circle of who is considered acceptable in America?